The clock ticked past 2 a.m. Blue light illuminated John's tired face. His eyes darted across the screen. Memes, news articles, cat videos, nothing held his interest. He scrolled further into the depths of the internet. A strange sense of unease settled over him. The room felt colder. He rubbed his eyes, trying to shake the feeling. The internet was a strange place at this hour. Shadows seemed longer. Sounds seemed amplified. He knew he should log off, get some sleep, but something kept him glued to the screen. A morbid curiosity. A flicker in the corner of his eye. A new post, not on his usual feed. This one was different. No username, no timestamp, just a link, a live stream. The thumbnail was blurry, almost indiscernible. He leaned closer, squinting at the screen. A shiver ran down his spine. He couldn't explain it, but something about that link felt wrong. It was like an open door in a dark hallway, an invitation to somewhere unknown, dangerous. He hesitated, his finger hovering over the mouse pad. A part of him screamed at him to close the laptop, to walk away, but a stronger part, fueled by a morbid curiosity, urged him forward. He glanced at his watch. 2:27 a.m. The night was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that amplifies every creak and whisper in the house. What was he even doing? This was stupid. He was letting his insomnia get the best of him. The hours had slipped away, and now he was caught in this endless loop of sleeplessness and anxiety. He went to close the laptop, but his hand froze. It was as if an invisible force was holding him back, compelling him to stay. His eyes were drawn back to the link that had been haunting him for the past hour, to the blurry image that seemed to shift and move, even as he stared at it. It was almost hypnotic, pulling him deeper into its mystery. He took a deep breath, trying to rationalize his fear. It was just a trick of the light, he told himself. Nothing more. It was just a link, a random live stream. But why did it feel so ominous? Why did it feel like it was calling out to him? Probably some boring gamer or a late-night cooking show. Yet the thumbnail was unlike anything he had seen before. It was unsettling, almost otherworldly. He was letting his imagination get the better of him. He rubbed his eyes, trying to shake off the unease that had settled in his chest. He told himself he'd just take a quick peek. Just a few seconds to see what it was all about, just to satisfy his curiosity. After all, curiosity was harmless, right? It was just a click. Then he'd close the laptop and try to get some sleep. He needed to sleep. He needed to escape this night that seemed to stretch on forever. But even as he lay in bed, he knew sleep wouldn't come easily. The image, the link, it would all still be there, lurking in the back of his mind. He tossed and turned, the weight of his thoughts pressing down on him. The struggle was not just with sleep, but with the unknown that awaited him on the other side of that link. Finally he sat up, a new resolve forming. He had to know. He had to confront whatever it was that had ensnared his mind. With a deep breath, he reached for the laptop once more. This time he wouldn't hesitate. This time he would face it head on. The screen lit up, casting an eerie glow in the dark room. The link was still there, waiting for him. His finger hovered over the trackpad, a moment of final hesitation. Then, with a determined click, he opened the link. His eyes widened as the screen filled with an image that would change everything. The struggle was over, but the real journey had just begun. He clicked. The page loaded instantly. No buffering, no ads, just the live stream. It was as if the digital world had opened a portal, inviting him into a new dimension. The screen glowed with an eerie light, casting shadows that danced across his face. The image was still blurry, but as his eyes adjusted, he started to make out the scene. It was a room. Not just any room, but one that seemed to exist in a different reality. The walls were lined with shelves, cluttered with objects that were hard to identify in the dim light. Dark, cramped, lit only by the pale glow of a computer screen. The shadows seemed to move, creating an unsettling atmosphere. It felt like the room was alive, breathing with him. A figure sat hunched over the keyboard, their back to the camera. The figure's posture was tense, as if they were deeply engrossed in something on the screen. He couldn't see their face, but he could sense their intensity. The air in the room felt thick, heavy. It was almost as if he could feel the weight of the atmosphere pressing down on him. The room seemed to be filled with a dense fog, making it hard to breathe. The sound of his own breathing seemed amplified in the silence. Each inhale and exhale echoed in his ears, creating a rhythm that matched the beating of his heart. It was a strange, almost hypnotic sensation. He could hear the faint hum of the computer in the live stream, a low rhythmic drone that seemed to vibrate in his bones. The sound was both soothing and unsettling, a constant reminder of the digital world he had entered. He felt a strange sense of vertigo, as if the floor was tilting beneath him. The room seemed to spin, and he had to grip the edge of his desk to steady himself. It was as if the boundaries between the physical and digital worlds were blurring. He was no longer just a viewer. He was becoming a part of the scene, drawn in by the mysterious allure of the live stream. His eyes were glued to the screen, unable to look away. He was being pulled into the scene. The screen seemed to expand, enveloping him in its glow. He felt a strange sensation, as if he was being absorbed into the digital world. The boundaries of reality were dissolving, and he was becoming one with the live stream. The figure in the live stream shifted in their seat. John leaned closer, trying to get a better look. He couldn't make out any details, just a dark silhouette against the bright screen. The figure's movements were jerky, erratic, like a puppet controlled by a novice hand. He felt a prickle of unease crawl up his spine. The silence in the room was broken only by the faint hum of the computer and the occasional click of a mouse. But there was something else, a faint scratching sound, like nails on wood. It seemed to be coming from just outside the camera's view. John strained to hear, his heart pounding in his chest. He tried to rationalize the sounds, an old house settling, the creaks and groans of the wooden beams expanding and contracting with the temperature changes. He had heard it all before, but tonight, it felt different. The air was thick with an unspoken tension, a palpable sense of dread that seemed to seep from the very walls, a branch scraping against the window. The familiar sound should have been comforting, a reminder of the outside world, but instead, it only heightened his anxiety. The rhythmic scratching was like a sinister whisper, a reminder that he was not alone. But deep down, he knew it was something else, something more sinister. The shadows seemed to move with a life of their own, shifting and twisting in the corners of his vision. He could feel an unseen presence, watching, waiting. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end, a primal response to the danger he couldn't see but could almost sense. His body was reacting to the threat, even if his mind was still trying to deny it. He had the overwhelming urge to close the laptop, to shut out the source of his fear. The screen was a portal to something he couldn't understand, something that defied logic and reason, to run away and never look back. But he couldn't. His legs felt like lead, his muscles refusing to obey his desperate commands. He was trapped, a prisoner of his own terror. He was frozen in place, every fiber of his being screaming at him to flee, yet he remained rooted to the spot. The fear was paralyzing, a cold, unrelenting grip that held him fast. His gaze locked on the screen. The images flickered and danced, casting eerie shadows across his face. He couldn't tear his eyes away, even as his heart pounded in his chest. The figure in the live stream suddenly spun around, its movements unnaturally smooth and fluid. It was as if it knew he was watching, as if it could see him through the screen, as if sensing his gaze. John gasped, his breath catching in his throat. The room seemed to close in around him, the walls pressing in as his fear reached a fever pitch, his blood turning to ice. He gripped the edge of his chair, his knuckles white with the effort. Every instinct screamed at him to look away, but he couldn't. The figure's face was obscured by shadow, a dark void where its features should have been. It was a faceless terror, an embodiment of his deepest fears. But he could have sworn he saw a pair of eyes glint in the darkness, eyes that seemed to pierce through the screen, locking onto his own with an intensity that made his skin crawl, eyes that seemed to stare directly at him. They were filled with a malevolent intelligence, a knowing that chilled him to the bone. He felt exposed, vulnerable, as if the figure could reach out and touch him at any moment. His breath caught in his throat. The figure in the live stream was wearing his clothes, the same worn-out band t-shirt and sweatpants he had on right now. Panic welled up inside him, cold and suffocating. This had to be some kind of sick joke, a prank. It couldn't be real. He reached out to touch the screen, as if to prove to himself that it wasn't real. His fingers met only cold glass. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, a frantic drumbeat against his ribs. This was impossible. He was home alone. He had been all night, so who or what was he watching? The figure in the live stream stood up, their movements mirroring his own. John stumbled back from the screen, his mind reeling. This was madness. He had to be dreaming. None of this made sense. He glanced around the room, his eyes darting from shadow to shadow, searching for a logical explanation. But there was nothing. Just the familiar confines of his own apartment. The same posters on the walls, the same clutter on his desk. He was trapped in a nightmare, a twisted reflection of his own reality. He had to regain control. He had to break free from this terrifying illusion. He forced himself to look back at the screen. The figure was gone. The live stream was still running, but the room was empty. He could hear the faint scratching sound again, closer now, coming from somewhere inside the room. He scanned the screen, his eyes searching for the source of the noise. He noticed something he hadn't seen before. A small, flickering light beneath the desk in the live stream. It was faint, almost imperceptible. But it was there. He squinted, trying to get a better look. His blood ran cold. It was a camera lens. He was being watched. The camera in the live stream suddenly jerked downward, as if someone had knocked it. John held his breath, his heart pounding in his ears. The camera was now pointing at the underside of the desk. He stared at the screen, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Two eyes stared back at him from the darkness beneath the desk. They were wide, unblinking, filled with a cold, malevolent intelligence. They weren't human eyes. They were something else, something ancient and evil, something that had been watching him, waiting for him. John's scream died in his throat. He couldn't tear his gaze away from the screen. The camera in the live stream slowly panned down, revealing more of the creature hiding beneath the desk. It was a face that would haunt his nightmares for the rest of his life. Pale, gaunt, with eyes that burned like hot coals. Its mouth was open in a silent snarl, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. The scratching sound intensified, accompanied by a low, guttural growl. The creature was moving, slowly emerging from beneath the desk, and then the live stream cut to black.